The town of Pinecrest lay cradled in a valley, like a forgotten relic, in the palm of a sleeping giant. To Elias Thorne, viewing it from the crest of the winding road in his rented sedan, it was less a relic and more a patient in critical need of intervention. He adjusted his glasses, the morning sun glinting off the lenses, and took in the scene with a practiced, dispassionate eye. The town square, his primary objective, was a quaint, almost cliched postcard of Americana, but to Elias, it was a flowchart of inefficiencies. His car rolled to a silent stop at the single, four-way stop sign that governed the square's traffic, or lack thereof. He observed the system, or the lack of one. A lone pickup truck waited patiently for an elderly woman crossing the street at a pace that could only be described as geological. There were no designated crosswalks, no traffic lights, no clear signage. The buildings surrounding the square, though charming with their brick facades and painted shutters, showed a haphazard approach to urban space. Awnings jutted out at conflicting angles. Park benches were placed seemingly at random, and the centerpiece of the square itself was a sprawling, untamed island of grass and ancient oaks, around which traffic navigated in a wide, wasteful loop. Elias felt a familiar itch in his fingers, the urge to pull out his tablet and open his schematic software. He could already see the perfect, logical grid superimposed over this charming chaos. Dedicated turning lanes, angled parking to maximize capacity, a consolidated pedestrian zone with clear, safe pathways, a modern plaza with permeable pavers, integrated seating, and sustainable lighting. It was beautiful in its own way, a symphony of order. He drove once around the square, his gaze analytical, before parking in front of a cafe called the Roasted Acorn. Stepping out, the air surprised him. It was crisp and carried a scent he couldn't immediately place, a clean, resiny fragrance that was both sharp and comforting. It was the smell of pine, of course, but so pervasive it was like the town's own atmosphere. Inside the cafe, the low murmur of conversation dipped for a fraction of a second as he entered. He was a new variable in their equation. He ordered a black coffee from a smiling young woman, his posture rigid against the slouching comfort of the rustic interior. "New in town?" she asked, her voice friendly. "Elias Thorne, city planner," he said, the title a statement of purpose. He placed a business card on the counter. "I'm here to consult on the modernization of the town square." The friendliness on her face didn't vanish, but it solidified, becoming something more cautious. "Oh, the square project. You'll be wanting to talk to Mr. Finch, then. He's got opinions." "I'm sure he does," Elias said, his tone neutral. "But the plans are based on proven urban development principles. Increased foot traffic, improved safety, economic revitalization." A man sitting at the counter, his hands calloused and cradling a mug, chuckled softly. "Good luck with that, son. Arthur Finch's opinions are more like bedrock. You're not the first planner they've sent." Elias merely nodded, collecting his coffee. He was used to initial resistance. Change was a threat to the ecosystem of habit, but data, logic, and the demonstrable benefits of progress always won out. He was sure of it. His first official meeting was with Mayor Higgins, a jovial man with a nervous laugh whose office was in a small building on the south side of the square. The mayor welcomed him warmly, shaking his hand with both of his own. "Mr. Thorne, we've been expecting you. So excited to see what you've come up with. Progress, that's what Pinecrest needs." A shot in the arm. Elias unrolled the preliminary schematics on the mayor's desk, the crisp white paper and sharp blue lines, a stark contrast to the worn, wooden surface. "The concept is a shared space model, Mayor Higgins. We reduce the asphalt footprint, create a unified pedestrian and vehicle zone that naturally calms traffic. We'll have modular seating, a state-of-the-art water feature, and dedicated zones for vendors and community events. It will transform the square from a passive space into the vibrant heart of Pinecrest." Mayor Higgins beamed, tracing a finger over the drawing of the new plaza. "It's wonderful. Just wonderful. So modern." "There is, however, one significant obstacle," Elias continued, his voice dropping into a more serious register. He pointed to the northern edge of the square, where his plans showed a sleek, new public conveniences building and an expanded parking area. This area is currently occupied by a seasonal business. The mayor's smile tightened. Ah, yes. Finch's Christmas tree farm. The lot on the corner. It's the logical place for the new amenities block. It provides the most efficient access from both the main road and the proposed parking. We'll need to acquire that land. Mayor Higgins sighed, the sound deflating his earlier enthusiasm. Arthur Finch's family has been selling trees on that corner since this town was founded. It's not just a business to him. It's tradition. Tradition doesn't pay for outdated infrastructure, Mayor, Elias said, his voice calm but firm. The economic impact of a modernized square will far outweigh the revenue from a seasonal tree lot. I'll speak with Mr. Finch today. I'm confident I can make him see the larger benefit for the community. The mayor looked less confident. Just tread carefully, Mr. Thorne. Arthur is a good man, but he's as stubborn as the old oaks in the square. An hour later, Elias stood on the corner lot in question. It was larger than it had appeared on the satellite images. A small, red-painted shack stood at the front, its windows shuttered. Behind it, the land sloped gently upwards, not with wild grass, but with row upon row of perfectly aligned evergreen trees. Douglas firs, Scotch pines, blue spruces, in various stages of growth. They were a living, breathing inventory. And the scent he'd noticed in the cafe was here so potent it was almost a taste on the tongue. The smell of cold earth and pine sap. He saw a figure moving among the trees, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a heavy work jacket, examining the branches of a fir with a gentle, practiced hand. As Elias approached, the man turned. He had a face carved from the same weathered wood as his shack, with sharp blue eyes that held a startling clarity. This was not a man who would be easily swayed by pie charts. Mr. Finch, Elias began, extending a hand. I'm Elias Thorne, the new city planner. Arthur Finch looked at the offered hand for a moment before taking it in a strong, calloused grip. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were wary. Thorne, I've heard. You're the one who wants to pave over my family's legacy. Elias maintained his professional composure. I'm here to discuss the future of Pinecrest, sir. The modernization of the town square is a vital project for the town's economic survival. My plans include a new public facility and expanded parking, which would be situated on this plot of land. I'm prepared to discuss a fair market value acquisition, plus assistance with relocation. Arthur Finch didn't respond immediately. He turned back to the fir tree, running a hand over its needles. This is a concolor fir. Smells like oranges and pine, mixed together. My grandfather planted this, one the day I was born. It's not for sale. None of them are. With all due respect, Mr. Finch, this isn't just about the trees. It's about the town. Improved infrastructure will bring more visitors, more business for everyone. The roasted acorn, the bookstore, the hardware store, they'll all benefit. This project is for the greater good. Arthur finally turned to face him fully, his gaze level and unyielding. The greater good, he repeated, the words sounding foreign and hollow on his tongue. This lot, Mr. Thorne, is the greater good. For 6 generations, every family in Pinecrest has gotten their Christmas tree from this corner. Every single one. Children who are now grandparents picked out their first tree here. This isn't a business. It's a bookmark in the story of this town. You can't quantify that in your spreadsheets. Sentiment is a powerful thing, Elias conceded, though the word sentiment felt flimsy in the face of his data. But it doesn't fix potholes or attract new families. Progress requires compromise. Sometimes, old things have to make way for new. A faint, hard smile touched Arthur's lips. Progress. Is that what you call it? Replacing something living and growing with something cold and hard? You want to put a bathroom where my grandfather's hands are buried in the soil. He shook his head. No. The answer is no. You can take your plans and your fair market value and turn them right around. My trees aren't going anywhere. The finality in his voice was absolute. It was the sound of a door slamming shut. Elias felt a flare of frustration. This was illogical, emotional. It was standing in the way of what was objectively better for the community. This project has the full support of the town council, Mr. Finch. We have the legal authority to pursue eminent domain if necessary. I'd much prefer we come to a mutual agreement." Arthur's blue eyes turned to ice. "Eminent domain? You'd use the law to steal a man's heritage." He took a step closer, and Elias was struck by the sheer, immovable presence of the man. "You listen to me, son. You can have your meetings and your votes, but I will be here, on this land, for every one of them. This is my home, and I don't surrender my home without a fight." He turned his back on Elias, a deliberate and powerful dismissal, and walked back into the rows of his trees, disappearing among the deep green shadows. Elias stood alone on the edge of the field, the scent of pine now feeling less comforting and more accusatory. He had expected resistance, but not this deep, spiritual defiance. He looked from the orderly, living grid of the tree farm to the messy, chaotic grid of the town square in his mind's eye. One was a testament to patience and nature, the other to logic and human design. They were two different languages, and he had just been told, in no uncertain terms, that he did not speak the native tongue. The battle for Evergreen Square had begun. The following week, Elias set up a temporary office in a spare room at the town hall, a space that smelled of old paper and lemon-scented polish. He became a fixture in the square, a man in a too-clean overcoat with a tablet perpetually in his hand, measuring, observing, and taking notes. He ate his lunches at the Roasted Acorn, hoping to foster a sense of approachability, but the conversations around him often hushed when he drew near. He decided to gather support the modern way, with a presentation. He spent days refining his slides, creating 3D renderings that showed a transformed Pinecrest Square. The videos were slick, with digital families laughing as they strolled through the new plaza, children dancing in the interactive water feature, couples sharing coffee on the modular benches under strings of elegant, year-round lighting. It was a vision of a bustling, prosperous, and clean future. The town meeting was held in the high school auditorium. The room was packed, a sea of curious and apprehensive faces. Elias stood at the podium, laser pointer in hand, and laid out his case with flawless logic. He cited traffic flow studies, showed graphs projecting a 20% increase in holiday season revenue, and detailed the safety features of the new design. He spoke of accessibility, of making the square a place for everyone. "This isn't about erasing our past," he concluded, a line he had practiced to sound sincere. "It's about building a foundation for our future, a future where Pinecrest isn't just a dot on the map, but a destination." There was a smattering of polite applause, led by Mayor Higgins, but it was thin, lacking conviction. Then Arthur Finch stood up from a seat in the middle of the crowd. He hadn't said a word the entire evening, just sat with his arms crossed, listening. Now all eyes turned to him. He didn't approach the podium. He simply stood where he was, his voice a low rumble that carried to every corner of the silent room. "Mr. Thorne talks about foundations," Arthur began, his gaze sweeping over his neighbors. "My foundation is the land my great-great-grandfather cleared. He talks about the future. My future is in the saplings I planted last spring, the ones my grandchildren will harvest. He shows you pictures of fancy lights and cement, but he can't show you the smell of a fresh-cut tree in your living room. He can't show you the feel of the sap on your hands, or the sound of your father's saw biting into the trunk." He paused, letting the imagery settle. He wants to replace all that with the water feature. He says it's for everyone, but if it comes at the cost of something that has been at the heart of this town for over 100 years, who is it really for? An older woman near the front nodded vigorously. "My Billy picked out our first Christmas tree from your dad, Arthur, the year we were married." A man in a flannel shirt added, "My kids won't even come home for the holidays if we can't go to the lot and bicker over which tree is the perfect one. It's our tradition." The mood in the room shifted palpably. Elias's data and renderings seemed to evaporate in the face of these personal, tangible memories. He had appealed to their minds, but Arthur had spoken to their hearts. He saw doubt on the faces that had once been neutral. He was losing them. "The tree lot can be relocated," Elias insisted, his voice straining to maintain its calm. "The tradition can continue elsewhere." "Where?" Arthur challenged softly. "To some field out on the highway? It's not the same. The square is the heart of the town. The tree lot on the corner is the town's Christmas heart. You can't transplant a heart, Mr. Thorne. You either have it, or you don't. The meeting ended not with a vote of confidence, but with a deep and unsettled tension. Mayor Higgins, looking flustered, declared that more discussion was needed. As the crowd filed out, many stopped to clap Arthur on the shoulder or offer him words of support. Only a few, younger residents perhaps, lingered to ask Elias questions about the proposed increase in parking. Elias packed his things, the euphoria of his initial vision replaced by a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He had been outmaneuvered. He had underestimated the power of a story. Later that night, sitting in his sterile rented apartment on the edge of town, Elias stared at his renderings. The perfect, clean, orderly plaza. He tried to superimpose the memory of Arthur Finch's face, the conviction in his voice, the collective nodding of the townspeople. For the first time, his vision of progress looked sterile, empty, like a stage set waiting for actors who would never come. He opened a new document on his laptop. The header read, Pinecrest Square Modernization, Cost-Benefit Analysis. He had run the numbers a dozen times. The benefits always outweighed the costs. But now he created a new column. He didn't know what to label it. Intangible value? Community heritage? The cursor blinked mockingly. How did you quantify the smell of oranges and pine on a tree planted the day you were born? He deleted the column. It was unscientific. It was sentimental. And yet, the blank space where it had been seemed to accuse him. The conflict settled into a cold war, fought with petitions and town council subcommittees. Elias's days were filled with meetings that went in circles. He found an ally in a young, ambitious councilwoman, Sarah Prentice, who saw the economic potential and was frustrated by the town's resistance to change. "They're living in the past, Elias," she said to him over coffee one afternoon. "They don't see that the world is passing Pinecrest by. We need this." But for every Sarah Prentice, there seemed to be two others who were swayed by Arthur's quiet, steadfast presence. The tree farmer never raised his voice in meetings. He simply stated his position, rooted in history and family, and let its weight settle on the proceedings. Frustrated, Elias decided to change tactics. If he couldn't win over the old guard, he would mobilize the next generation. He arranged to give a talk to the high school's civics class. He talked about urban design, about creating spaces for youth, about how cool it would be to have a place to hang out that wasn't the outdated, poorly lit square. The students were receptive, their eyes lighting up at the mention of Wi-Fi hotspots and potential concert spaces. After the talk, a group of them surrounded him. "My dad says you're trying to shut down Mr. Finch's farm," one boy said, his tone more curious than accusatory. "It's about finding a balance," Elias explained, "making room for new things that the whole community can enjoy." "But Mr. Finch is cool," a girl with purple streaks in her hair said. "He lets us volunteer at the lot in December. We help people carry trees, and he gives us free hot chocolate. It's like the only fun job in town." The comment struck Elias as oddly poignant. He had been painting Arthur as an obstacle to progress, a relic. But to these kids, he was a benefactor, a source of community and hot chocolate. As he was leaving the school, he saw Arthur's pickup truck parked outside the woodshop classroom. The man himself was carrying a crate of small, potted saplings from the truck bed into the school. Curious, Elias followed at a distance. He watched through the window of a classroom door as Arthur, with a gentle demeanor Elias had never seen, handed a small pine sapling to each student in a horticulture class. "Now, this isn't just a plant," Arthur was saying, his voice calm and clear. "This is a responsibility. It's a living thing. It needs sun, water, and patience. You're going to care for it this semester. You'll learn its needs. And if you do it right, in a few years, it'll be strong enough to be planted somewhere, to become part of someone else's landscape, someone else's story. You're not just growing a tree. You're growing a future memory." Elias watched the teenagers, usually so restless and glued to their phones, handle the tiny trees with a surprising reverence. Arthur moved among them, offering quiet advice, his rough hands gently adjusting the student's grip on the pot. This was not the stubborn obstructionist from the town meetings. This was a teacher, a steward. For a moment, Elias felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a sense of exclusion. He was the one with the advanced degree, the sophisticated plans. Yet this simple man possessed a form of knowledge and a connection to these kids, and to this town, that he could never replicate with his data. He left before he was seen, the image of Arthur Finch patiently teaching children about growth and patience burning in his mind. The turning point came with the first snow. It fell softly overnight, blanketing Pinecrest in a pristine, silent white. Elias woke to a world transformed. The harsh edges of the old square softened, the Christmas lights that had been strung up twinkling against the fresh powder. It was a Saturday, and the tree lot was officially open for the season. Driven by a compulsion he didn't fully understand, Elias pulled on his coat and walked to the square. The scene there was something out of one of the sentimental paintings he despised. The lot was bustling. Families trudged through the snow, their breath pluming in the cold air. Children darted between the trees, shouting, "This one, Dad. This is the one." The little red shack was open, glowing warmly, and a wood-burning stove piped smoke into the sky, filling the air with a cozy, woody scent. Arthur and a few of the high school volunteers were there, helping customers, sawing trunks, and tying trees to car roofs. Laughter rang out, sharp and clear in the cold. Elias stood on the periphery, an observer, a ghost at the feast. He saw an elderly couple carefully examining every tree, their conversation a quiet, familiar ritual. He saw a young father hoist his small daughter onto his shoulders so she could put the star-shaped tag on a tall Fraser fir. He saw the purple-haired girl from the high school hand a cup of hot chocolate to a shivering toddler. This was it. This was the intangible value he couldn't quantify. This was the living, breathing community his renderings had failed to capture. His beautiful, silent, empty plaza had no place for this specific, messy, joyful chaos. His water feature would be frozen solid, his modular benches buried under snow. But here, in this disputed corner, life was thriving. His gaze fell on Arthur, who was shaking hands with the elderly couple, his face crinkled in a genuine smile. For a fleeting second, their eyes met across the lot. There was no anger in Arthur's look, no defiance. There was only a deep, abiding certainty, and something else, a hint of pity, as if he felt sorry for the man standing alone in the cold, outside the circle of warmth and belonging. In that moment, Elias Thorne's certainty shattered. The foundation of data and logic upon which he had built his entire career cracked. He saw, with devastating clarity, that he wasn't trying to improve this town's heart. He was trying to replace it with a machine. And a machine, no matter how efficient, could never have a heartbeat. He turned and walked away, the sounds of laughter and the scent of pine and wood smoke following him, a haunting and beautiful elegy for a plan that was perfect in every way, except for the one that mattered. Elias didn't go to his office on Monday. He called Mayor Higgins and canceled his meetings for the day, pleading illness. It wasn't entirely a lie. He felt a profound sickness of the spirit. He spent the day in his apartment, the schematics for Pinecrest Square spread across his kitchen table like a patient's autopsy report. He looked at them now with new eyes. He saw the ruthless efficiency, the clean lines that cut through the organic, messy reality of the town. He saw the place designated for the public conveniences building, and imagined, not a modern restroom, but the absence of the red shack, the absence of the snow-dusted trees, the absence of the laughter. He thought of Arthur's words, "You can't transplant a heart." Picking up a red pencil, he began to draw, not on his tablet, but on a large sheet of tracing paper laid over the original plan. He started at the corner, Arthur's corner. He drew the boundary of the tree lot, preserving it entirely. He rerouted the pedestrian pathway to curve around it, not through it. He moved the proposed amenities block to a less optimal, but workable, location on the south side, sacrificing a dozen parking spaces. He redesigned the plaza, not as a stark, modern space, but with more green areas, with planting beds that could, perhaps, feature native shrubs and yes, even evergreens. It was a compromise. It was messy. It was illogical from a pure urban planning perspective, but it felt right. That evening, he drove out to the tree farm. The lot was closed. dark and silent under a clear, starry sky. He parked his car and walked up the gravel drive to Arthur's small house, set back among the trees. A light was on in the window. He knocked, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. After a moment, the door opened. Arthur stood there, still in his work clothes, his expression one of wary surprise. "Mr. Thorne, may I come in?" Elias asked, his voice quieter than usual. Arthur studied him for a long moment, then stepped back, granting entry. The house was exactly as Elias had imagined, warm, lived in, filled with sturdy, simple furniture and the pervasive, comforting scent of pine. Photographs covered the walls, generations of Finches standing in the same lot, with the town square visible in the background, changing slowly over the decades. "I'm not here to fight," Elias said, standing awkwardly in the center of the living room. "Then why are you here?" Arthur asked, gesturing for him to sit in a worn armchair by the fireplace. Elias sat, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "I saw the tree lot on Saturday, with the families." Arthur nodded slowly, taking a seat opposite him. "It's the best day of the year." Elias struggled for the words. They were not words from his professional vocabulary. "I was wrong." Arthur's eyebrows rose slightly, but he remained silent. "My plan, it was a good plan. For a different town. It was based on principles, but not on people. I didn't see what this place really was. I only saw what I could make it." He looked around the room, at the history on the walls. "You weren't just being stubborn. You were being a guardian." "I'm just a man who loves his trees and his town," Arthur said softly. Elias reached into his portfolio and pulled out the new sketch, the one on tracing paper. He unfolded it and handed it to Arthur. "This is what I should have proposed from the beginning." Arthur took the paper, his rough hands handling it with care. He looked at it for a long time, his eyes tracing the red lines that preserved his land, that worked with it, not against it. "You're saving the lot," he said, his voice low. "It's the heart of the town," Elias replied. "You can't build a future by cutting out the heart. You build around it. You make it stronger." He pointed to the new elements. "We can still improve the traffic flow here. We can add better lighting and safer crosswalks. We can even create a small, permanent pavilion for community events next to your lot, so the traditions have a place to grow. It's not as sleek. It won't win any design awards, but it's a plan for Pinecrest, the real Pinecrest." Arthur Finch looked from the paper to Elias's face. The suspicion and defiance in his eyes had melted away, replaced by a deep, thoughtful respect. He saw the concession, the intellectual surrender, and the genuine effort to understand. "This," Arthur began, clearing his throat, "this is vision." "It has a tree farm," Elias said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in weeks. Arthur handed the sketch back. "You should present this." "Will you stand with me when I do?" Elias asked. Arthur held his gaze and gave a single, firm nod. "I will." The second town meeting had a different atmosphere. The air was still thick with anticipation, but the undercurrent of hostility was gone. Elias stood at the podium once more, but this time, Arthur Finch stood beside him. Elias began not with traffic studies, but with the story. He talked about coming to Pinecrest, about seeing only problems to be solved. He spoke of his meeting with Arthur, and his own failure to understand what he was asking the town to sacrifice. He didn't hide his initial frustration or his moment of clarity in the snow. "I came here to modernize your square," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "But I discovered that some things are already perfect, just as they are. The most advanced planning principle in the world is no match for the value of a shared memory." He then revealed the new plans. He showed how the tree lot would remain, become the centerpiece of a redesigned, greener, more organic square. He showed the new pathways, the improved but less intrusive lighting, the pavilion that could host the town's Christmas market right next to the tree lot, creating a unified holiday hub. The applause that followed was not polite. It was thunderous. It was a release of tension, a sound of unity. Mayor Higgins, looking immensely relieved, clapped the hardest of all. The vote to approve the revised plan was nearly unanimous. Weeks later, as spring began to thaw the winter frost, The first phase of construction began. It was a collaborative effort. Elias's contractors worked carefully around the boundaries of the tree farm. Arthur, in turn, helped advise on the planting of the new greenery in the square, his knowledge of the local soil and climate proving invaluable. One warm afternoon, Elias found Arthur supervising the placement of a new bench near his lot. "It's starting to take shape," Elias said, handing Arthur a coffee from the roasted acorn. Arthur took it with a grunt of thanks. "It's a good plan, Thorne. It has balance." It was the highest praise Elias could have imagined. He stayed in Pinecrest through the spring and summer, overseeing the project. He no longer lived in a sterile apartment, but rented a small house with a view of the mountains. He became a regular at the cafe, where people now called him by his first name. He had been absorbed, not as a conqueror, but as a convert. When December came again, the new old evergreen square was ready. The improvements were subtle but effective: better traffic flow, beautiful new lampposts that cast a warm golden glow, the new pavilion, and the preserved, vibrant tree lot at its heart. The square was more beautiful and functional than ever, but its soul was intact. On the opening night of the Christmas tree lot, the square was packed. It was the scene from Elias's vision, but real and infinitely better. The digital families from his renderings were replaced by the real families of Pinecrest, their laughter echoing not off cold concrete, but mingling with the scent of pine and wood smoke. Elias stood near the new pavilion, watching. He felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Arthur, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed one to Elias. "For you," Arthur said. "Part of the tradition." Elias took the warm cup. "Thank you, Arthur." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, 2 former adversaries, watching the life they had, in their own ways, fought to preserve and improve. "You know," Arthur said, his gaze sweeping over the bustling, joyful square, "my grandfather would have approved. He was a pragmatic man. He believed in growing, but also in adapting. You adapted, son." Elias took a sip of the rich, sweet chocolate. It tasted like belonging. "No," he said softly. "I learned." In the heart of the town, under the twinkling lights and the watchful boughs of the evergreens, Elias Thorne had finally found a foundation stronger than any data set, a place to put down roots.